Ladies and gentlemen,
Good evening.
are you ready?
Okay, here we go.
You're listening to the Deal Room Podcast. Join us as we bring you the inside scoop on business sales and acquisitions. Get across trends in the area and hear the industry's best recount their real-life tips, traps, and experiences. Now, here's your host, Joanna Oakey.
Hi, it's Joanna Oakey here, and welcome back to the Deal Room Podcast, a podcast proudly brought to you by our commercial legal practice, Aspect Legal. Now, today is a bit of a different episode. This is what we are now calling in our new episodes of this type a Fireside Chat. The whole idea of it is that we bring you something a little bit different to our usual discussion just about business sale and acquisitions. We're providing a slightly different viewpoint from advisors who can help us from different angles in this space. So tune in for this episode of the Deal Room Podcast. Here we go.
Joanna, let me just say, this beast of a book, there's very few books that I've read cover to cover this thick I got through this in 4 days. This is awesome.
Oh, stop.
Awesome.
Wow. Oh, Glenn, that's really sweet. Thank you.
Total world class and hyper relevant to where we're at the moment. We actually just sold. We bought a business. So Dent is a portfolio of companies. We've acquired 7 or 8 businesses over the time. We just sold the first one that we acquired 7 years ago for a multiple 7-figure exit, 60% cash, 40% shares, which we're very happy with. And the cash just hit the account like last week. And then we had an opportunity to sell another one that we brought on only 2 years ago that's happening now. So all this stuff has kind of been happening, and that was just like running on the side. Now we're turning it up as like, hang on, this should be a much bigger part of our portfolio strategy. And so then this arrived in the mail, and we've kind of been sort of making it up as we go along, getting feedback from some advisors here and there, of course, etc. But this was like a full-on masterclass in terms of how grown-ups do it.
Oh, Glenn, I love it. You are fabulous. Thank you. And thank you for reading it cover to cover.
No.
Great.
Well, you don't have
Not
to.
getting too bored.
I didn't do it. I didn't do it as a favour because, I mean, to be fair, we've produced over 1,000 books now, as you know, through our... I mean, we now own 2 publishing companies, and through the KPI program, I had to give up reading books that our clients produce just because they wrote a book. I mean, it's just, I couldn't do it. So I didn't read it as a favor at all. I read it because it was super, super relevant. I mean, you've got this phrase called acquisition entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I've never actually heard it summed up like that. I don't actually know if that's a thing or not, but it's like, that's actually interesting. That's what we've been doing. That's what we want to do more of. I mean, we've acquired, 8 over the last 7 years, and we want to acquire 50 over the next 5 years, maybe 10. And so this is a big deal.
It's like deal fever, though, isn't it? And this is one of the things that I probably say in the book, but I've seen time and time again, when people get onto the idea of acquisition and then the concept that you can build a business and use acquisition to build existing businesses and then build them for exit and then exit for great prices, suddenly, you know, it's like something goes off in an entrepreneur's head that is, oh my gosh, there's this whole other way that I didn't realize, and they're on it.
And I think it really works for someone that's already got a stable, probably 7-figure business. Ideally, well, certainly the way we play with it is that the big insight that we had was, we got a valuation done on our company many years ago, and it came in at about 4 or 5 million US. And then a mentor of ours, who he made his hundreds of millions buying and selling businesses and listing them and doing all this sort of stuff, he's like, that equity is now currency. right? So it's like imagine you've now got a $5 million home that you own outright, right? It's possible to now start leveraging that value to start acquiring other properties, and their growth, ends up overshadowing any of the costs or downsides or risks associated in doing that. It was like, and that's kind of where we really had the first gear shift, that most of our business focus had been on the P&L, right? How do we build revenue? How do we save costs? That creates profit. Great. But what we've found is where the real money is made is building and selling the balance sheet, right? And we've made more money in a couple of signatures, really, than we have in running sales teams and marketing teams and operational teams and marketing and trying to navigate brand and culture and all this kind of stuff that you put into building a business. Whereas it's like, holy shit, we've made, from a profit perspective, we haven't made as much because the business is successful, but when we sit there and look at 7 figures sitting in the bank and how much energy went into producing that from the sale, is like this compared to the gigantic amount of energy required to build the machine. But it's like a chicken and an egg that you kind of, well, certainly the way we approach it is you need the machine to, I guess, create the foundation to then be able to play this bigger game. So Joanna, what made you write it? I mean, no one writes a book like this that is so comprehensive on a whim. What was the catalyst?
Yeah, look, I guess I'd spent, I spent more than 2 decades working with businesses in these different phases. So buying businesses, growing businesses, selling businesses. And I'd seen business owners make the same mistake again and again and again and again, and I'd seen some business owners, and I talk about the stories in the book, some brilliant stories of people who had achieved this nirvana at exit, and spent all of these years building amazing businesses and then recognizing that value in the exit and being so excited about the exit and reflecting back on the process of the period of time of their growth and exit with such happiness, And then I've seen the flip side so much more often. The business owners who've grown their businesses without having the proper legal infrastructure in place and blown themselves up along the way because they've created disputes, they've created issues in their business that they've not been on top of because they've not built the right legal infrastructure. Or I don't know if it's even worse, but the business owners who've spent a lifetime in their business and gotten to the day of sale and being completely disappointed because they needed, in inverted commas, a certain amount of money from the sale of their business, but they hadn't grown their business in a way that maximized that value. So, I just thought there were so many key things that I saw that people did well or / poorly that they could impact by a bit of knowledge in the area.
Well, I've already referred this to a bunch of people, right? Because I got a lot of friends of mine that have sort of found themselves stuck in the early 7 figures. They've got a $1, $2, $3 million business. They've got hopes and dreams of kind of what we would call crossing the desert and growing to a $10 to $15 million business. But they're caught in the paradigm of, I've just got to work out how to sell more stuff, open more locations, grow a bigger business. And I end up having the conversation with them about how we've done it through acquisition, because it's way easier to acquire revenue. Because I think what often people don't understand is, if I walked this past a friend of mine, I'm like, if you get your valuation, you're trading at like say 4 times revenue, but you acquire a small, or even 4 times profit, 4 times multiple, right? But you acquire a smaller business that's only trading at 1 times profit, for example, right? So if you acquire them for $250,000, the moment that it hits your balance sheet, it costs you $250,000, maybe not even in cash. It could be debt, it could be a share swap. We haven't spent any money on any of our acquisitions. It's all been through share swaps. But when we do this, the moment it hits our balance sheet, it goes from being a $250,000 cost to $1 million profit, because as soon as it hits our multiple, the value is realized against our multiple, not against theirs. And this is where, this is where this book, I think, helps business owners get it. And now I've got something that I can refer to people and go, just like, read this, get your teeth into that, and you'll start to get it. Because when you start to realize how the game of business really works at this, like, Dan and I call it the adult level. Like, okay, this is how the adults do it. Because it's like, oh, I'm going to acquire a $250,000 asset. At the moment, my signature on it's worth $1 million, and I can then grow it and sell it, and it adds more value to my group because I've got more diversity, I've got more scale, I've got, access to different markets and what have you. And it's just so necessary. And so I thank you for it, because now I've got something, because people ask me all these questions and it gets to the point where it's like, oh, I'm not the expert in this. And it really is a legal and accounting. One of the things that I really loved how you talked about here is and you had some great case studies around how deals get killed by advisors, right? And I think it's so brilliant that you're so well positioned in your industry as the deal making lawyers, and that you really understand, like, don't kill the deal. What's the minimum amount you need to be involved to get the deal across the line, as opposed to killing it through overprotection, really. So it's quite interesting. You really come at this from almost the anti-lawyer perspective. It's not about the legal stuff, it's about the result. And that's just so refreshing.
Yeah. Look, I'm an entrepreneur at heart. So every time I deal with lawyers, because I deal with lawyers, in our practice, all the time. And it drives me mental when I see a very non-business approach from a lawyering perspective, because they're 100% lawyers are absolutely imperative in the deal. Accountants are imperative in the deal. There's lots of things you can get wrong. There's lots of risk. But you can manage all of that risk with the right approach. But the right approach is rarely a whole heap of clauses that nobody understands. Like, we're living in the real world. It's about understanding the reality of the opportunity, the risk, and how to manage that from a practical perspective, so you can get good deals done, not kill deals along the way.
I love it. And look, if anyone's watching this, if you're especially if you're already an established business, 7 figures, you've got a stable team, you've kind of hit to the point where you're pulling money out of the company, it can survive without you reasonably well, etc. This is an amazing strategy. Acquisition entrepreneurship is like the way I would recommend growing from 2 or 3 million to 10 to 20 million. Right? Yeah, you're going to keep growing your own business, but to be able to do that vertically or horizontally, lots of different ways to think about acquisition, using your own money, using other people's money, or you're not using money at all and just using the value of shares. And all this stuff is covered in here. I would highly, highly, highly encourage you to get it. My big question, Joanna, is, are you going to do the audiobook version?
I know, that's a lot of talking, isn't it?
Because it's a lot of talking, but it would have been great for me to be able to have this in my ear on the fly. I just got back from Dubai, etc. And I just find for something like this, given the power it has to change the way people really think about that would be amazing.
Well, watch your space, I guess, is the answer to that, Glen Carlson.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So good. So good. I just want to say congrats. It's really, really well done. And it's just a beautiful book. So nice job.
Oh, thank you, Glen. Thank you so much. Wonderful. Oh, look, huge thank you, Glen. Really great to talk today. And look, thanks for all of your fabulous comments, but really insightful comments as well, talking from someone who is living and breathing this content that I've talked about. So, huge thank you.
Oh, awesome. You.
Well, that's it for this episode of the Deal Room podcast in our series of short and sharp fireside chats. Hope you enjoyed what you heard today, and if you did, don't forget to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening in. See you next time on the Deal Room podcast, a podcast proudly brought to you by our commercial legal practice, Aspect Legal. See you next time.
Ladies and gentlemen.
That will conclude this evening's entertainment.
Thanks for listening to the Deal Room Podcast. To find out more about this episode and other episodes in the series, check out the show notes or head over to our website at thedealroompodcast.com.au.